pilots and passengers. Halloween is coming up very soon. It's going to be on Saturday. Halloween is a massive celebration for so many people. The population loves to dress up in different costumes of demons, mysterious creatures, even monsters. All of this is pushed in a huge marketing campaign that we see every single year. Head into the local supermarket and you see the Halloween aisle. People love to buy pumpkins and carve them, go to their friend's house and have Halloween parties, spend time watching horror movies, gory horror movies of murder, paranormal movies of ghosts and ghouls and all things that go bump in the night. But why do we do this? Why is Halloween such a big celebration? There's a general spooky vibe around Halloween too. There's so many superstitions and this general belief that on Halloween night, the veil between the physical and spiritual world is much thinner. This means it's easier to contact the dead and communicate. You might not realise it, but the industry behind Halloween is massive. Statistics show that Americans spend an estimated $2.6 billion on candy every year just for Halloween. It is the nation's second largest holiday. But what really is Halloween? What is the true background behind Halloween? What are we really celebrating? You don't really get told what you're celebrating at Halloween. And it'll surprise you that what we celebrate now is so much different to what it was hundreds of years ago. Just look past the face paint, look past the candy, look past the trick-or-treating and you'll see the real reality of Halloween and what it's all actually about. But first, before we get into that, I'd like to say, if you'd like to support the channel, please subscribe to Dare to Fly Today. Turn on notifications and don't forget to share this video with others if you enjoy it. You can also support my channel on my Ko-fi page and my PayPal. Links will be down below in the description. I appreciate everyone who supports my channel and I love you very much. Now, let's fly into today's video. You'll be surprised to learn that Halloween has Celtic origins, ancient Celtic origins. Its actual name is Samhain. Samhain is an ancient pagan religious festival. All of this originated from ancient Celtic traditions. Samhain was celebrated to welcome in the harvest and the darkest half of the year. And much like today, this whole superstition that the world between the physical and the spiritual gets thinner was believed back then, and that was a huge part of Samhain. Those who celebrated believed that the veil between this world and the other world was much thinner. During Samhain, therefore, communication and interaction was possible with the dead. Out of all of the 4 quarterly fire festivals, Samhain was the most significant and held the most importance. It took place between the midpoint between the fall equinox and the winter solstice. Whilst the harvest was getting gathered in, hearths in homes were left to die out. After the harvest work had been done, people would join with druid priests to light a community fire using a wheel which would cause friction and spark flames. The wheel represented the sun, and whilst all of this was being done with the community fire being lit, people would pray. Animal sacrifices were committed in order to celebrate the gods that they believed in, and as part of the rituals within this celebration, each person would then take a flame from the community fire and take it home with them to relight their hearth. The celebrations lasted 3 days and 3 nights, and people celebrating had to show themselves to local kings or chieftains. If you didn't show up to the celebrations, this would result in punishment by the gods, and that is not a good thing at all. These punishments were believed to either be illness or death. While some sources say that the celebrations went on for 3 days and 3 nights, some documents show that people continued to celebrate after that for up to 6 days, where they would drink lots of alcohol till the point of passing out and feasting on huge amounts of food. Now, as I previously mentioned, people who celebrated Samhain believed that the veil between this world and the spiritual or the other world was much thinner, and because of this, they believed that monsters and different types of spirits were able to come across and communicate. And whilst some were able to communicate, others were there to cause mischief and mayhem. And because the veil was much thinner, people would leave offerings of food and drink outside of their villages for the fairies or the seeds who would come across on purpose to cause mayhem. Those who celebrated believed that their ancestors were crossing over too in order to communicate with them, their loved ones. These fairies coming across as well were very mischievous. They were seeking to do no good. The Celts would dress up as animals and different types of monsters to scare off the fairies, to prevent them from kidnapping their ancestors whilst their ancestors tried to come across. This is where dressing up for Halloween originates from. During this time, the Celts would dress up as monsters associated with pagan and Celtic mythology to scare off these fairies, but at the same time they had to be careful of them as they believed that these monsters could also come and visit them and hang around at Halloween because the veil was so thin, such as the puka or puka, a shape-shifting creature that receives harvest offerings from the field. Or maybe even Lady Gwyn, a headless woman dressed in white who chases night wanderers and is accompanied by a black pig. Or the Dullahan, who appeared as impish creatures, sometimes even headless men on horses who carried their heads. When appearing as headless men, they even had flame-eyed horses, and it was a death omen to anyone who saw them. People would also have to watch out for the fairy host, a group of hunters who would haunt people on Samhain and kidnap them, or the Slough, who would come from the west to enter houses and steal souls. Samhain did not stay the same. It changed and adapted over time as new traditions were brought in and people changed how they celebrated it. Samhain in the Middle Ages was a little bit different to how Samhain was before then. The celebrations of the 5 festivals progressed and changed. Now, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this right, it's a very long word, be honest with you, I don't know what I'm going to read. Samhains, or bonfires, were more personal fires that were set during Samhain near homes and farms. This was a new tradition introduced, and those who did it believed that it would protect families from witches and fairies and all these kinds of monsters that are coming across because the veil was so thin. People started carving turnips, which were called jack-o'-lanterns, much like we hear today. This began as a new tradition where strings and sticks were attached and the turnips were embedded with coal. Later on, as time progressed, these were then changed to pumpkins. During Samhain in the Middle Ages, dumb supper was a new tradition that was introduced. Families would prepare dinners that were put out and laid out on tables, and they would invite their ancestors to come along and join them for dinner. Food would only be consumed after they had invited their ancestors to come along and to talk with them. By inviting their ancestors to come along, it gave the family a chance to update them on the latest things that have been happening, the latest news. And children, young children in particular, would entertain the dead by playing games, dancing, singing. During dumb supper and during Samhain, the doors and the windows would be left open. This would be to allow ancestors to come in and out of the home as they like. And they also left out cakes for their ancestors, so if they wanted to come in and eat one, they could just walk through the door or jump through the window. But following the Middle Ages, as Christianity was being introduced, things started to change, and Samhain was adapted and forcibly changed. The Christian Church tried to make Samhain a Christian celebration. During the 5th century, Pope Boniface attempted to make Samhain a Christian celebration. They moved the celebration to May and specified it as a day celebrating saints and martyrs. But the 5 festivals in October and November still continued even after this decree was put in place. In the 9th century, Pope Gregory moved the celebration back to the time of the 5 festivals, but instead declared it as All Saints' Day on November the 1st, and then on November the 2nd there was All Souls' Day, which followed that. And now we're getting into Halloween, where things really started to change and it became the celebration as we know it today. Samhain is now known as Halloween, or All Hallows Eve, on October 31st. And it still has some pagan aspects to it that can be found from the days of Samhain. Before things started to change, traditional pagan practices still continued in some parts. And then in 19th century America, as the Irish immigrants moved across as a result of the potato famine, they introduced Halloween to Americans who latched onto it and fell in love with it and started to celebrate it themselves. Now there's parts of Halloween and traditions that we all still do, such as trick-or-treating and dressing up. But why do we do that? Well, it's because these are traditions that were part of the Celtic and pagan celebrations. For example, trick-or-treating. Why do we do it? What is it all about? Trick-or-treating is believed to be derived from ancient Irish and Scottish practices in the nights leading up to Samhain. People would commit pranks on one another in the run-up to Samhain, and this was a tradition that was also committed on Samhain as well. And it was believed by families that these pranks were being committed by fairies and monsters who were crossing over, you know, not their neighbour next door or anything. Now, trick-or-treating can be traced back to Ireland, where a tradition called mumming can be found. Mumming was the practice of putting on costumes and going door to door, singing songs to the dead. and this was done in exchange for cakes which were given as payment. Now let's take a look at the early Christian and medieval roots of trick-or-treating. As I've mentioned, in the 9th century, All Souls' Day was introduced, which was on November the 2nd, and the celebrations of All Souls' Day resembled a lot of Samhain. Poor people would visit houses of wealthy people and receive pastries called soul cakes in exchange for promising to pray for the souls of the homeowner's dead relatives. This practice was known as souling and was later taken up by children who would go door to door, singing songs and dancing, where they would then ask for food and money. Likewise, in Scotland and Ireland, there was another tradition called guising, where people would dress up in costumes and accept offerings from different households. They would sing songs, dance, tell a joke, or perform a trick. This was done in exchange for collecting a treat, which would be fruit, nuts, or coins. As we know, Halloween was brought across to America by Irish immigrants who were moving across because of the potato famine. In the early 20th century, these Irish and Scottish communities in America revived souling and guising. In the 1920s in America, pranks was the main tradition that was carried out by people. It became a main Halloween activity for young people, and as a result it caused so much trouble. And there was a real big problem going on with so many people causing vandalism, acts of violence, and even assaults. And during the Great Depression especially, these pranks on Halloween started to devolve into much more than just mischief. However, community-based trick-or-treating became a very big thing, and more people started to celebrate Halloween and enjoy it and look forward to it. However, all of these celebrations ended once World War II started. The sugar ration meant there were no sweets to hand out. But once the war finished and we entered the post-war baby boom, Halloween became a massive tradition once again, and everyone started to celebrate it in America. Marketing campaigns started up which were targeting people to celebrate Halloween, showcasing costumes, showcasing trick-or-treating. Candy was super popular and everyone enjoyed going trick-or-treating for candy. Samhain also has roots in Wicca or witchcraft. In the 1980s, when Wicca or witchcraft started to become more popular, Samhain was reintroduced. There was a revival of Samhain which resembled traditional pagan practices. Those who practiced witchcraft would celebrate Samhain with traditional fire ceremonies, modern celebrations, and activities that celebrated nature or their ancestors. It was seen as the passing of the year and incorporated some traditional witchcraft beliefs and practices. One example is the Druid traditions, where Samhain is celebrated as a festival for the dead on October the 31st. This involved celebrating with a bonfire and a communion with the dead. American pagans would also celebrate with music, dancing, and celebrations that are called witches' balls. All of these witches' balls and celebrations are celebrated sort of in time with Samhain. It doesn't always have to be on Samhain itself, it's in proximity of the actual day. Now, Halloween is also celebrated by Satanists, and it's quite dark. There are those who believe that Satanists who celebrate Halloween, nowadays that is, they don't do anything that's questionable. They're not up to anything bad. But it's important to note that Samhain itself, in terms of the pagan and ancient Celt celebrations, they performed sacrifices, be it animal sacrifices and even sometimes human sacrifices. Satanists regard Halloween very high up in their celebrations, so we do have to question what rituals they may be performing and how they celebrate it. The Church of Saturn is just one Satanist sect or society, you could argue, or cult to some, which celebrates Halloween and actively mentions it as being a very important part of their traditions, part of their life. Let's just get a bit of background of the Church of Saturn first, and its ties to Halloween. The Church of Saturn was founded by Anton LaVey in the US in 1966. He was one of the most prominent Satanists up until his death in 1997. He wrote the Satanic Bible and many other forms of satanic literature, including books on satanic rituals. In the Satanic Bible, Anton LaVey wrote, "After one's own birthday, the two major satanic holidays are Walpurgisnacht, which is on May the 1st, and Halloween. Walpurgisnacht is a German annual event known in folklore as Witches' Night. It's celebrated in a similar way to Halloween and is also shrouded in mystery and darkness. Therefore, the Church of Saturn recognises that Halloween is an extremely important day of the year. It is stated on the Church of Saturn website that Satanists embrace what this holiday has become and do not feel the need to be tied to ancient practices. This night we smile at the amateur explorers of their own inner darkness, for we know that they enjoy their brief dip into the pool of the shadow world. We encourage their tenebrous fantasies, the candied indulgence, and the wide-ranging evocation of our aesthetics, while tolerating some of the chintzy versions, even if it is but once a year. For the rest of the time, when those not of our meta tribe shake their heads in wonder at us, we can point out that they may find some understanding by examining their own All Hallows Eve doings, but we generally find it simpler to just say, think of the Addams family and you'll begin to see what we're about. So whilst the Church of Saturn say that they do celebrate Halloween, they state that, they're just celebrating it as a day of evil, a day of mischief, a day when they can reflect upon their own darkness within, a day when they just get to be seen as like the Addams family, as they say so themselves. But you got to question what is really going on, because at the heart of it, Satanists worship Satan, a god who is dark, a god who is not of love and light. So we need to start asking some real questions here. One person who has spoken out about Halloween and Satanism is an ex-Satanist called John Ramirez, who is now an evangelist. When he was growing up in the Bronx, he used to be a Satanist and was part of a satanic church. He was part of this church from the age of 8 up until he was 35, in which he then transitioned to becoming an evangelist. Growing up, he had really strong ties to Satanism. He would take part in different rituals which involved drinking blood, sacrificing animals, and sometimes made references to human sacrifice. He was baptised with the devil and even got married in a satanic wedding on Halloween itself. By taking part in different rituals, he is covered in scars and has marks all over his body, which he states are the marks of the beast. He reached the highest rank of devil worshippers and was given a name which was chosen by the devil himself after he had to kiss a human skull and was then cut and burned during a satanic ceremony. These satanic ceremonies were very common to him, and he was burned and cut during many of them. He had to shed his own blood during these ceremonies and rituals. He states that he then turned to Christianity after he was possessed twice. During one time, he was in church and he grabbed a pastor by the throat. Then everything changed for him in October 1999. During this month, his spirit visited hell during the night. He talked with Satan, and whilst talking with Satan, the cross of Jesus appeared, and this caused the devil to fall. He then felt like he was shocked back to life, and everything changed for him. His eyes were opened as to the darkness that he was living and what he was doing in his life. He realised that the way he'd been living had been completely wrong. He was filled with darkness and that he had to change his life and turn to a life of love and light. He was mentored by the late pastor David Wilkerson at the Times Square Church. During this time, he threw away all kinds of witchcraft and satanic paraphernalia, including items that were taken from satanic rituals such as soil from cemeteries, hair, animal and human bones. He also threw away all of his texts that he'd read, and all of this he'd spent thousands and thousands of dollars on, and he's throwing it all away because he realised he was wrong. During a recent interview, he said, "I wonder why people celebrate Halloween these days. Because in essence, I know what Halloween is about. I was involved in witchcraft and Satanism for 25 years, selling my soul to the devil. I was a general for the devil, as a warlock." It's very eye-opening to hear what people have to say about Halloween and why we shouldn't be celebrating it, or that we should change our view on Halloween and start thinking a little bit differently about what it is and what it was. As I've mentioned, Halloween is a very, very important day for Satanists and marked on their satanic calendar. For example, if you take a look at the satanic calendar, it shows you which dates are of great importance to them and what sort of activities they get up to. I used a couple of sources here and this is what I found out. From October the 13th to the 30th, it is the satanic preparation for All Hallows Eve, or Samhain. This is when abductions, holding and ceremonial practices are done during this time. Preparations are then made for human sacrifice. It started from the 13th of October for a reason, because 13th is 31st backwards. It's the opposite, and opposites are a huge thing for Satanists. It's symbolism. They work in opposites because, what's the opposite of light? Darkness. And the same works for them. It's all a part of their practices, their rituals. If you keep your eyes open, you'll see a lot of that still going on today. From October the 28th to the 30th, it is the Satanist High, which is a holy day related to Halloween. The sort of rituals they commit during this time are blood rituals. This includes human sacrifice. A human sacrifice is performed each day of these celebrations, and they don't care who they sacrifice during this time. It can be male or female and of any age. So yes, that means it could be an adult. And yes, it means it could be a child. It's very disturbing to read and hear about. From October the 30th to the 31st, it is All Hallows Eve and Halloween night. This is where the blood and sex rituals come in, and this is how they celebrate it. They perform these rituals. For example, in terms of sex, they will reach a sexual climax on this night. This involves doing sex rituals which will likely be having sex with one another, or with those who they are planning to sacrifice. There are many associations with demons during this time, and the Satanists don't really care who they sacrifice at this point when celebrating on this night. It could be animal sacrifices or it could be human sacrifices, and it can be animals and humans of any age once again, male or female, they really don't care. And it doesn't end there. Once Halloween is finished with, you enter November the 1st, which is another Satanist high, another holy day for them, and once again they perform blood rituals. And this involves human sacrifice. Male or female, any age. Child, adult, teenager, it doesn't matter to them. But what does this mean? Why am I telling you this? Why am I telling you these disturbing things about Halloween? Why should we care about the origins and the background of Halloween? I think it's important to know what you're celebrating, to know why you're actually celebrating it, rather than just going along with everything and seeing it as a time when you eat candy and wear costumes. When you hear about how others celebrate it, particularly how Satanists have been reportedly celebrating it, it makes you think, and it makes you question, well, what else are we celebrating that has darker ties? Now, I know we can't guarantee that all these human sacrifices are going on. I'm not saying that that is the case. It's a tricky one. It's difficult to know because we just don't know. But you have to look at things and think, there has to be truth in this. This has to have originated from somewhere. And we have to ask, can we guarantee that these rituals aren't still happening in this world today? By that I mean the darker rituals, the satanic rituals, human sacrifice, murder, torture. We don't know what's going on. So many people have pointed out how the elites act and how they are and what they celebrate and the symbolism that can be found in the mainstream media today. Celebrities, all these symbolism, these opposites, all these things that people point out. And it's very satanic. And I won't doubt that. I believe it's satanic. We have to question what else is going on that we don't know about. I think in time things will be revealed and it'll be very eye-opening. I decided to create this video also because I think it's a time that we need to still be mindful. I'm not saying to people that they shouldn't celebrate Halloween. People can still celebrate Halloween or do whatever they like. That's none of my business. But I think we should be mindful because in this world there are likely people committing dark acts. People who do perform rituals on Halloween, and this year it's going to be on a full moon. So that's another important thing for so many people who practice, say, Satanism or witchcraft. During this time, I ask that you send out some positive vibes and some healing energy and thoughts, because there's a lot of negativity around now, and there's likely going to be a lot of negativity shared on Halloween, a lot of negative vibes going out and thoughts. So let's combat that with some positivity and think about those who could be suffering. Thank you for watching this video, guys. Stay spooky, and if you are celebrating Halloween, then I hope you have a really good celebration, be it watching horror movies or spending time with your family, which I think is really important that we do in times like these. If you'd like to support the channel, please subscribe to Dare to Fly Today and get ready to take flight. Share this video with others, and if you'd also like to support my channel through a donation, such as on my Ko-fi page or via PayPal, then links will be down below in the description. Thank you so much, guys, and I love you all very much. Sending you lots of love and light energy, and as always, fly high, fear less.